do you like there's a law in California now about how you can hire, or I think it's proposed. It just actually came across my email because the Daily Mail sent it to me to ask me if I would write an op-ed about it. I'd never even heard of it. And it has something to do with being able to hire 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds as prostitutes. And I was just like, the state is losing its shit. Like, would you regulate it? Because then you've got like crack addicts all over the street, and LA's a mess.
So these are different. Look, there's different. The question of regulation in terms of like, look, so to tackle them separately.
Okay.
Number one, anything underage should not, like, children cannot consent. And so absolutely, that's just like, children are a different story. Adults are the ones who have control of their rights. I mean, children have rights, but they have them kind of in escrow, like
Fair.
Your parents are holding on to those for you.
That's nice.
And it's our job as parents to make the determination. And of course, as we both know, because we both have kids, you're constantly doing that with your kids. You're constantly like aware of when you're using force with your kids, like, because there are things like, I mean, I don't believe in hitting kids. I don't like use force like in that sense with my kids, but I like my 6-year-old does not have a choice about whether she's going to brush her teeth tonight.
Right.
Like it's not an option I'm giving her.
Yeah.
This is something she has to do. But I am aware, and the standard that I think all parents know on some level, the standard is like, is this ultimately in her best interest? Like ultimately when she's 35 years old, I'm very confident that she'll be like, okay, I'm glad you made me brush my teeth. Like that was probably a good idea. And parents always, even with this power, we're never perfect. And we will sometimes use a force and not a suggestion in a way where like, that really wasn't for their best interest. That was just because it was a little bit more convenient for me. You know what I mean? And there's a balance there, and you try your best to not become tyrannical and only use that for, but anyway, kids are a different story. They can't consent. In terms of regulation of business, the fundamental problem, which is what I was getting to, is that liberals, they fail to recognize the power dynamic. So if you're like, hey, these big corporations have too much power, we need regulation. It's like, okay, but what's the obvious contradiction there? If something's going to regulate that thing that has too much power, it must, by definition, have more power than the corporation you're concerned about. And so you now have to create a more powerful superstructure that has the power to impose its will on corporations. And if you understand the Lord Atkin principle there, that power is just going to corrupt now. And in fact, the more powerful it is, the more it will corrupt. Now, and you could look at this, I'll go, there's things corporations do that are not great. The worst of them almost always involve getting the government on board. But if you want to put that up to the crimes of the government, you simply have no match. I mean, and look at the 20th century. It's like you know what I'm saying? Like there were some big corporations in the 20th century, but who is responsible for all of the evil? It is government after government after government, because of course you'd need the power of government to really do the most evil things. Now, your other thing, I want to make sure to not conflate it. That to me is like regulation of the economy and regulation of business is a very different category than government property, which is like the streets or a park or something like that.
I understand.
Right? In this case, what you essentially have is, you have the problem of socialism, which is that when the government owns the property, it's like, who really owns this? Whose is this? But I would argue, and I think this is consistent with libertarian thinking, that, look, if the government taxes the people, so they force the people to give them what is rightfully theirs, their money, and then they use this money to build streets and roads, highways,
schools,
and
hospitals,
public parks, and all these things. Well, then, okay, they do have an obligation to at least to some degree represent the will of the people here and maintain this as a private business would. So no, nobody should be going, in my opinion, nobody should be going to get locked up in a cage for 10 years, which I also think, again, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling here, but this is another fundamental libertarian insight.
You're Dave Smith. You're the brand king. You're the man. This is what's so awesome about you. Go.
Well, if you building off of the libertarian principle that the government is a group of is a gang essentially, and that the characteristics of their actions are no morally different than the rest of ours. If you ask yourself kind of the most basic question when it comes to laws, is we're going like, look, who is it morally justified to throw into a cage? You know, like that's really the question. You know, we like prison is a serious thing to do to somebody. And it's something that we kind of remove ourselves from. Part of that is because we have the world's biggest prison population, and maybe it's a little uncomfortable to look in the mirror sometimes. But like if you're talking about enslaving a human being, you're talking about throwing a human being chained up into a cage to very likely be tortured, which is kind of like a joke, like in our society. It's like a running joke on Law and Order. You know, when they're interrogating someone, they go, "Guys like you don't do very well in prison." Like, haha. You know, like this is it's so crazy. By the way, if you really like think that through for a second, like that's normalized in like our psyches. But so if you're saying that, do I think that somebody who is shooting up heroin ought to be thrown into a cage, enslaved, treated like an animal for a decade? Then no, I think that's like monstrously evil. If they should be kicked out of a playground, that I'm okay with.
Okay.
You know, like if there's so if you're it's insane. It is
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. And make sure to let me know what guests you want to see on in the future.